welcome back to the Tale of the Flopsy Bunnies, Part 2. When he was gone, Mrs. Flopsy, who'd remained at home, came across the field. She looked suspiciously at the sack and wondered where everybody was. Then the little wood mouse came out of her jam pot and Benjamin took the paper bag off his head and they recounted the dreadful tale. Benjamin and Flopsy were in despair. They couldn't undo the string, but Mrs. Tittlemouse was a very resourceful mouse. She nibbled a hole in the bottom of the sack. The little rabbits were all pulled out and pinched gently to wake them. Their parents stuffed the empty sack with 3 rotten vegetable marrows, an old blackening brush, and 2 decayed turnips. Then they all hid under a bush and waited for Mr. McGregor. Mr. McGregor came back. He picked up the sack and he carried it off. He carried it hanging down as if it were rather heavy. The Flopsy Bunnies followed at a safe distance and they watched Mr. McGregor go into the house. Then they crept up to the window to listen. Mr. McGregor threw down the sack on the stone in a way that would have been extremely painful to the Flopsy Bunnies if they'd happened to be inside it. They could hear him drag his chair on the flagstone and chuckle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little rabbits, said Mr. McGregor. What's that? What have they been spoiling now? Inquired Mrs. McGregor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little rabbits, repeated Mr. McGregor, counting on his fingers. 1, 2, 3. Don't be silly. What do you mean, you silly old man? In the sack. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, replied Mr. McGregor. The youngest Flopsy Bunny got up upon the windowsill. Mrs. McGregor took the sack and felt it. She said she could feel 6, but they must be old rabbits because they were so hard and all of very different shapes. Well, these aren't fit to eat, but the skins could do fine to line my coat. Line your coat, shouted Mr. McGregor. I shall sell them and I shall buy myself a tasty treat. Mrs. McGregor untied the sack and put her hand inside. When she felt what was inside the sack, she became very angry. She turned round and said Mr. McGregor had done it on purpose. And then Mr. McGregor was very angry too. And one of the rotten marrows came flying through the kitchen window and nearly hit the youngest Flopsy Bunny. And it's just as well it didn't, because that would have rather hurt. Then Benjamin and Flopsy thought it was probably time to go home. So Mr. McGregor did not get his treat and Mrs. McGregor did not get her rabbit skins. But the next Christmas, Thomasina Tittlemouse got a present of enough rabbit wool to make herself a cloak, a hood, a handsome pair of mittens, and a scarf too. The end.